In the news this week, law enforcement under attack. Juvenile crime in WA's north continues to pose a major challenge to embattled officers. An exclusive interview coming up.
100 billion litres. A top-up for WA's water supply is on the way with a new desalination plant.
Fivehol's shocking behaviour revealed in Parliament report detailing sexual assault and harassment allegations.
Hundreds of Perth foodies queue to get a taste of American fast food chain InNOuts burgers. And later, Dr. Andrew Miller's comment.
This is The Evening News with Ivan Loom and Maliva Thorne.
Good evening. Police are under attack as lawlessness among juveniles continues in the north. At least 4 police officers have been injured and more than a dozen police cars have been rammed in recent weeks as authorities crack down on crime. Mining and Pastoral Regions MLC Neil Thompson warns that if youth lawlessness continues, it could result in serious injuries or death in the community. He joins us exclusively this week. Neil, thanks for joining us. 4 officers were injured and 13 police cars rammed. Is it fair to say that police are under attack?
Well, look, you couldn't express it in any other way, Ivan. This is a crisis, and we keep saying it's a crisis. Where else in Australia do you have police cars being a target of youths and other vehicles? Where else in Australia, in fact, where else in the developed world do you have this kind of behaviour? Now, I've heard from people on the ground that number now has increased, and it may be at least 2 dozen. I don't know the latest figures. These are the figures that were revealed in budget estimates over the period of operational regional shield. So it's really important that the people know we are in a crisis and the government needs to do something about it.
So you're saying if this continues, an innocent member of the community may end up in the wrong place at the wrong time, getting injured or killed?
Well, look, we've got 4 police officers being injured. We've had 13 reported cases of cars being rammed. It seems to be a sport. I understand there's more now over the whole financial year. I understand that number is actually higher. At some stage, somebody could get in the way in the wrong place at the wrong time, and that could result in serious injury or death.
Several weeks ago, you told me exclusively that a senior police officer in the region has vented frustrations in your community forum. Any updates as to what happened next?
Yeah, look, Ivan, that's correct. Look, I've heard from frustrated police that they lock kids up, or they catch kids, they go to court, they're put out on bail, they're back on the street. Now, there was a case quite recently where this actually happened almost to exactly the way I've described it, and that incident, I'm led to believe, actually resulted in another police car being rammed. It resulted in a serious break and entry into a major retailer, creating massive problems for our community. So we have a serious issue about how some of these repeat offenders are being treated. We also have this terrible risk, to see our young police, our hard-working police, under such threat. Now, I have a lot of sympathy for the police. They've got a very difficult job, and I think they're doing a great job, but we need more support from all arms of government across the whole sector.
Just very quickly, do you know how much funding the police need to solve the problem?
Look, that was an interesting question that was raised in relation to the issue around expenditure. We see in the budget papers that per person police effort, for example, is about $900 per person. But we know that actually in the regions we have a much higher crime rate. In the area like the Kimberley, rates of crime for crimes against persons and crimes against property are between 10 times and 16 times higher. Now, we've got to go back to the issue on the ground. If the rates are 10 to 16 times higher than what we're seeing in Perth, in the Perth metropolitan area, then we should be investing 10 to 16 times more on the problem so we can actually make our communities safe again.
Neil Thompson, thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
A boost to WA's water supply is on the cards, with 100 billion litres of seawater set to transform into drinking water each year for a new desalination plant. The plant will be built in Alkimos before the end of the decade and powered by renewable energy, while also supporting WA's new emissions target. Nelson Liu reports.
A necessity in the past to boost WA's water, needed once again. The state turning to desalination to secure its supply for the future.
Have been incredibly important for providing drinking water, water for domestic and commercial use.
16 years after WA opened its first desalination plant in Qantas, Alkimos will become home to the state's newest plant, following less rainfall and dwindling dam levels.
We have a drying climate and we want to make sure we reduce the reliance on groundwater.
The state government committed $1.4 billion in last year's state budget for the $2 billion plan to guarantee more fresh water. Desalinated water from Perth's current Qantas and Biddingup plants account for 145 gigalitres of water, or 45%, with Qantas producing 50 gigalitres. Alkimos' new plant will eclipse that, doubling Qantas' production.
Continues our push to secure the state's drinking water supplies in the face of climate change.
The plant has not yet received approval from the WA Environmental Protection Authority, but it could be set to deliver its first 50 billion litre stage by 2028. The government says producing the water is energy intensive, but in a first, it plans to counter that by powering it with renewable energy. That energy will be wind, with Water Corporation securing up to 400 megawatts to power all 3 desal plants, moving away from coal-fired energy, in line with its net zero target.
But importantly, it's about ensuring that that drinking water supply is a net zero emitter by 2035.
It's hoped it'll have a big impact on the government's new goal to cut 2020 emissions by 80% by 2030.
And we're on this course because we are very intent on addressing our emissions and sending a clear signal to the rest of the economy.
Nelson Liu, WAMN News.
A report has laid bare an appalling range of behaviours and cover-ups in WA's mining industry, revealing a sector rife with sexual assault and harassment.
The report, titled Enough is Enough, was tabled in State Parliament on Thursday, containing explosive findings indicating poor behaviours by male workers were accepted or overlooked, while the fly-in, the fly-out industry failed to protect its workers. It included stories of power play behaviour, rape, unwanted touching and unwelcome attention, with reports made to WA Police and the Department of Mines, Industry and Regulation. 79 findings and 24 recommendations were made, including overhauling reporting and training. The McGowan government says it will consider the recommendations and support victims in any way possible.
It's the news travellers want to hear, with Qantas launching flights that will travel directly from Perth to Jakarta and Perth to Johannesburg. Qantas CEO Alan Joyce and WA Premier Mark McGowan fronted the press this week, stating the routes are an aspect of their goal to diversify the state's economy. They also stated that the flight to Johannesburg is the only direct connection between WA and South Africa, thus making it highly sought after due to the trip eliminating stopovers in the Middle East, Sydney and Singapore.
Very exciting day for Perth and Western Australia. Can I thank Qantas and Perth Airport for making this happen? Obviously the last 2.5 years has been a dramatic period for all of us, but particularly for the airline industry and for the airport. And we're so pleased that they've come out of this and able to do this new exciting trip, which will open up these opportunities for our state.
Opposition leader Mia Davies has put forward a bill demanding the McGowan government freeze household utilities for Western Australians. Despite the $400 electricity credit in the state budget, a WAMN news poll 2 weeks ago revealed that 40% of our viewers prioritise the reduction in household fees and charges ahead of food, petrol, rent and mortgages. Ms Davies says that the government has no excuse due to the record $5.7 billion surplus.
Well, I'd simply say, how is it that we are the wealthiest state in the nation? We have a Premier that arrogantly points to that massive budget surplus when talking about his colleagues over in the eastern states, yet does nothing, very little indeed, to relieve the pressures of the bills and the financial pressures that West Australians are feeling.
As the housing affordability crisis continues, a property agent has brought the idea of professional management of house room rentals to Perth. Rather than renting a house or an apartment, HMO focuses on providing professional agent services for landlords who wishes to rent rooms for different tenants in a flexible yet affordable arrangement. HMO CEO Neil Gibbs says the model provides tenants a stable rental, increased return for investors, and frees up more properties in the tight market. He also supports the idea of a permanent policy for the National Affordable Rental Assistance Scheme.
We were getting tenants knocking on the door after about 6 months being in operation because they could hear how the properties were being managed a lot better than, let's say, for instance, somebody that's got a 5-bedroom house in Wilson and they rent it out to 6 or 7 students. That way, no one's really in charge. There's no correct management in place. There's no house rules in place. And I think the clincher for us as well is we send cleaners through the common areas of our properties every 2 to 4 weeks. And a lot of property investors that manage share houses themselves definitely do not do that.
This week on the WMN Extra News Club, as the incoming Police Commissioner Cole Blanche prepares for power, community leaders state the importance of ensuring a racially diverse police force in Western Australia, with hopes that the new Commissioner will make this a priority.
Yeah, look, policing in a multicultural society has been on the agenda for decades. Despite it being, an item of great interest, not just to the multicultural communities, but to many governments, regardless of what persuasion, we still don't have a police force that reflects the cultural and linguistic diversity of our population, and that is an absolutely critical, issue that needs to be addressed. His predecessors have, had a go at it, but clearly we still haven't got to where we should be at in the 21st century.
You can read and watch all that and more on the WMN Extra News Club. Subscribe via the link in the description and support independent local journalism.
Hundreds of people have braved the wet weather to get their burger fix in what has been the first visit from an American restaurant in years. People queued for hours outside fast food giant InNOuts burger pop-up shop, which opened for one day only this weekend in Perth CBD as part of a market research project. The restaurant says they have had more than 200 hungry customers, but have been able to serve them all.
In-N-Out Burger, we just bring the freshness, the quality. Again, this part of our market testing tour, we're just happy that we had a great turnout with all of our customers and loyal customers, some previous and some new ones out there that I've already spoken to.
And now here's AMAWA spokesman Dr. Andrew Miller with his weekly COVID-19 update and medical commentary.
Hi, thanks for your time. Throughout the pandemic, we've had the advantage of trailing behind other countries and where they're up to with COVID, and we now have to look again to the rising numbers and problems that they're seeing with the BA4 and 5 variants of Omicron across Europe and the US, and we need to take that seriously. Now, when we talked about opening up again, there was a lot of indication that we would pump the brakes and wait and see what happened and potentially reintroduce masks and so on if there were problems down the track. And unfortunately, the rhetoric recently seems to be just dismantling all protections against COVID spread and adopting the kind of let it rip philosophy of the United Kingdom, which is not doing well there. They've had a 20% rise in hospitalisations in the last few weeks, and they really are suffering from worker unavailability due to long COVID, which is causing a lot of suffering in those people. So we're still a bit behind in that. We haven't had high rates of COVID in our community, so that hasn't translated into a lot of longer term disability just yet. There's no reason to believe we're going to be any different to anybody else. So it's not a message of pessimism, it's just a message that we need to be prepared to try to reduce transmission, to get better access to the antiviral medications, to the Paxlovid and the Molnupiravir, the oral medications that can be prescribed through GPs to people who are vulnerable to this disease, so that we can start to reduce the death rate, because seeing 50 to 60 people die every day in Australia from this disease puts it at basically our number one cause of death in the community. So we need to slow that down. These are all lives that we've tried to preserve along the way, and people who've still got good years ahead of them to be with their family, not to mention the fact that they're not all elderly people. There's a range of people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. Certainly they're less in number, but they're no less significant than the rest of us. So let's encourage our leaders and be prepared to accept that breathing clean air is the way we're going to get out of this for the longer term and keep one another safe. We've also got the promise of Omicron-specific vaccines coming, and hopefully they will have a better effect at preventing hospitalisation and death than the Wuhan strain vaccine, which is what we're using at the moment. And still, of course, we need to keep pressure on about hurrying up the process to approve vaccine for our most vulnerable kids from 6 months through to 5 years of age. Thanks very much for your time.
That's Dr. Andrew Miller. Here is Leo with what's coming up on 6 News tonight.
Thanks, guys. Tonight on 6 News, the US Supreme Court votes to remove the constitutional right to abortion, striking down the landmark Roe v. Wade case and paving the way for states to fully ban abortion, even in cases of rape and incest. Plus an attack on the crossbench, anger from Independence, One Nation, Jackie Lambie Network and more, as Anthony Albanese cuts the amount of personal staff for crossbenchers from 4 down to just 1. And a 6 News exclusive, we speak to the Deputy Leader of the Freedom Party, who says his party's focus is having an influence in the Victorian election outcome, more so than actually winning seats themselves, as Labor decides on new ministers following the resignations of 4 senior MPs. But what's the real story behind the retirements, and is it all just a media beat-up? Full details on our website right now, 6newsau.com. For now though, guys, it's back to you.
Thanks, Leo, and that's our weekly news and current affairs. We have the latest news on our website, wamnnews.com.au.
Don't forget to subscribe to the WAMN Extra News Club so we can continue our work in the community. Full details on wamnnews.com.au/news/extra. From Melly and myself, we wish you good health, good night, see you next Sunday.
Thanks for watching.